There is no combination more devastating than Bobby Fischer wielding the Evans Gambit. At 18 years old in 1963, he plays at 99.9% accuracy. Let's see what happens here. In the game, we have the Italian opening, maybe the most common opening in chess, and what this allows, the Evans Gambit. Bobby plays pawn to b4 and sacrifices a pawn. The bishop takes, and now the point of the gambit, pawn to c3, attacks the bishop, and after it moves, we're going to play pawn to d4 on the next turn. So we see bishop to a5 and now pawn to d4, and Bobby now has full control over the center. Also, by pushing these pawns, he's opened up new avenues for an attack with his pieces. So the opponent, they take the pawn, and all we care about in this opening is developing our pieces. So Bobby, he just castles, and he's down 2 pawns, begging the question, why can't you take the third pawn with d takes c3? Well, his grandmaster opponent calls the bluff. He plays d takes c3, and is now up 3 pawns on the 7th move of the game. But Bobby, he plays queen to b3, develops the queen, and is already threatening bishop takes f7 with check. The only way to defend is with the queen to e7 or queen to f6. So we see queen to e7, but now we keep developing our pieces. Knight takes c3, now prepares knight to d5 to further harass this queen. If the bishop takes the knight, the queen takes back, eyeing this g7 pawn and preparing bishop to a3. White has full control over the dark squares. So instead we see knight to f6, discouraging Bobby from playing knight to d5, also preparing to castle on the next turn. But Bobby, he goes for it anyway. Knight to d5, attacks the queen. The knight takes, and now Bobby takes with the pawn. And this does close down this light square diagonal, but he opened up the e-file to exploit the king stuck in the center. It also attacks the knight, and the knight does not have many places to go. So we see knight to e5, initiating a trade, but now we go for it. Knight takes c5, the queen takes back, and Black's point is we don't have rook to e1. This is covered too many times, and he's attacking the rook on a1, but it's easily dealt with. Bobby plays bishop to b2, further harassing the queen, developing the bishop, having ideas of taking on g7. So Black plays queen to g5 defending, and now we reach this position. How do you continue the attack as Bobby? He's down 2 pawns, but the bishop pair fully operational, the rook's ready to join in the center, while the king on e8 maintains on its initial square. Well, Bobby plays the strongest move. He plays pawn to h4 and sacrifices another pawn attacking the queen, with the point of trying to distract it away from guarding this g7 pawn. The problem is this queen doesn't have many useful places to go, and the grandmaster opponent, he just goes for it. Queen takes h4. But now we take on g7, attacking the rook. And Bobby, he takes this pawn, not simply because it attacks the rook on h8, but because by taking the pawn, now he has further control over the dark squares. The f6 and f8 squares are now controlled by Bobby's pieces. And after rook to g8, now we can finally go for it. This king is running out of squares. Rook to e1 with check. The bishop can take, but then the rook replaces it. You don't really make much progress. So instead, we see king to d8. And now, how do you finish this attack for Bobby? He plays a quiet move, queen to g3, sliding with the queen, attacking the queen on h4, offering a trade. And the problem is, it is forced checkmate. Now, you either give up the queen on h4, or you take and allow bishop f6, checkmate.